Hello, my name is Emily Wuerz, and I did my senior research project on a paper entitled Emerging Adulthood, Finding One's Faith and Worth. Emerging adulthood covers the age range of 18 to 25 years old when individuals grow out of their adolescent dependency, which can include family, and they gradually take on independence learned through social interactions. During this time, they come to find a sense of identity, what they believe in, and decide what they want for the future. Many emerging adults attend a traditional undergraduate college where they find more freedom with new responsibilities and experiences that can challenge the religious beliefs they were raised with. And being around other emerging adults with less parental supervision, emerging adults tend to reevaluate what they believe about themselves. In order to have some guidance, many emerging adults look to their peers for acceptance with less parental supervision, since this stage in their life calls for more independence. And with all of these perspectives considered, emerging adults try to understand a new moral foundation that makes sense to them, and from their new life experiences and what they intend to do with their life, their intended goals. So for some background information, a study done at Kaiser University by Sekellery et al. On emerging and older adults, and a study done by Barton and Miller explored the correlation between religiosity, positive psychology, depression, self-esteem, and the like. It was found that a negative correlation of depression and spirituality or religiosity and positive psychology was found, and a negative correlation was also found between self-esteem and depression, and this suggests a positive correlation between self-esteem and religiosity because of how they were correlated with depression. Another study showed was a meta-analysis on emerging adults measuring several variables with religiosity and spirituality, including self-esteem, and that was found to have a positive correlation. So for my study, I will be hypothesizing that religiosity and self-esteem will be positively correlated, and I will be using public use archival data from the AdHealth Codebook Explorer, which is abbreviated as ACE. The data was collected in a series of 4 waves from wave 1, 2, 3, and 4 of childhood, adolescence, emerging adulthood, and adulthood that used the same people longitudinally. I will be focusing on the wave 3 or W3 sample, emerging adulthood, that totaled 15,170 participants, but after some values were taken out, I was left with 4,786 participants. The data collected originally from the to comprise the archival data was all collected through at-home interviews. The materials that I used during my study was first from the internet. The AdHealth Codebook Explorer database was used to obtain 2 questions of archival data on the W3 sample. An Excel spreadsheet was used to enter the questions data to make a scatter plot, calculate the mean and standard deviation as well. And Jamovi was used to enter the data to perform a statistical test. The archival data was collected into computers during the wave 3 sample, and it was then stored into the ACE database. During my study, I accessed the ACE database and I searched the topics covered with the W3 sample under the self-esteem tab, since there were many questions that were asked in the original study. I selected the question, do you agree or disagree that you like yourself just the way you are? And then I collected the Likert scale response labels and response values, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree, with the response values of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And note that strongly agree is has a low response value of 1, and strongly disagree has a high value of 5 on the Likert scale. And the response labels of refusing to answer, did not know, and not applicable were recorded, but they were eliminated later on. For the second question, I used the same database, but I went under the religiosity tab and selected the question, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? I employ my religious or spiritual beliefs as a basis for how to act and live on a daily basis. Then I collected the Likert scale response labels and response values, as I did with the other question. And the response labels and response values were of the same values and the same labels. And I also recorded the extra response labels that I later eliminated. Once that occurred, the actual data from the participants from both questions was retrieved from a professor, put into Jamovi, and then given to me. I then placed that data into an Excel spreadsheet where the participant data from refusing to answer, did not know, and not applicable were then deleted because I was not going to use them for later analysis. A scatter plot was then created to show the correlation, including the linear regression line, slope intercept, and like values. And then I put the data into Jamovi, and under the analysis tab, I chose the correlation matrix analysis and performed a Pearson's R statistical test for comparison of the variables. Through the Pearson's R statistical test that was performed in Jamovi, and as you can see in figure 1, a statistically significant weak positive correlation was found between religiosity and self-esteem, with the Pearson's R value being 0.065, which is a weak relationship, and the p-value being less than 0.05, which shows a statistically significant relationship. And the slope intercept here, that is shown here, shows a weak incline, which represents a weak relationship. The mean score of self-esteem was 1.89, and the mean score of religiosity was 2.52. The hypothesis that religiosity and self-esteem would be positively correlated was supported, but it was not a strong correlation. By computing Pearson's R statistical test, the variables religiosity and self-esteem show a weak positive correlation, and the self-esteem mean of 1.89 was lower on the Likert scale than the religiosity mean on the Likert scale of 2.52. And again, a low value means more so that they agree or strongly agree or are neutral about it. The previous studies that I included did not explicitly measure for religiosity and self-esteem, but this study hopefully did further research on an explicit correlation between those two. And the other study that I included was a longitudinal study, but my study that I conducted was not longitudinal. So my main limitation was that I used only 2 questions from the AdHealth database with such a large sample size, and that imbalance of participants to the 2 questions then created 1 coordinate per each Likert scale value to be answered, which is why the linear regression line was important to show the relationship between the two variables. Many college students are emerging adulthood age and learning basically what they believe about themselves as people and how to feel comfortable as they are. And if they believe in a higher power such as God and the like. And it may be helpful for future studies to include more than two questions and to separate the males and females to help with the analysis. And I would like to thank my mentor and the psychology department for their support. Any questions, please leave them in the